Hey YouTube, I'm pumped about today's video. It's been 29 days since my last upload. Didn't want to keep you waiting too long. There's been a whole lot of progress on this Galant restoration, and I'm excited to start showing you what has been going on here behind the scenes in these last 29 days. So let's get started, shall we? What happened? When your pet's act up, they say it's your fault, and I suppose it's no different for mechanics and their tools. My air compressor blew out in the last video and I'm currently rebuilding it. Long story short, it's a two-stage compressor and I blew one of the head gaskets. I bolted this thing down 12 years ago here in the corner, and for space reasons it managed to get sandwiched in here good where I couldn't get to it without completely emptying off one of these shelves. It's kind of been a walk down memory lane, really. And it's also been a great opportunity. That's what all this stuff is doing strewn all over the place. I don't see how this is any different than rebuilding an engine to fix a power steering problem. Half the regulator's missing right now, and I can explain. I rebuilt and sealed up a huge hole in the second stage cylinder head against the wall. The job's really boring. There's 7 hole parts to it and 4 of them are bolts. You got a plate and 2 flat reed valves. I had to make my own head gasket. I forget what I bought this roll of fibrous gasket material for, but it came in clutch. At first I was hopeful that it was the same gasket used for a 1G throttle body elbow, but nope, no such luck. It's considerably bigger. Looked like it though. Took a little while with an X-Acto knife, but it turned out great. It blew up because one of the bolts loosened from vibration and then nature took its course. I had to clean up all the cap screws that hold the head down using the thread chaser set that I bought when the GSX project started. You gotta preserve your holes as well as the things that you put in them. They're just friendlier than a tap and die set. So once I fixed that, I was then able to hear the regulator leaking. Hole. Huge hole. You can't buy just the diaphragm, unfortunately. I had to buy the whole entire 240 volt power switch with valves, gauges, and dual regulator assembly. Of course I did, right? I mean, it's 20 bucks. Who cares? So yeah, no regulator, and I'm waiting on shipping. What a difference a few hours makes. There's actually room to walk around in here now. I safetied my light. Now it won't fall on my head anymore. You see that? I think the garage light wanted some attention. It saw me giving this one a pat and turned itself on. It's like, me next. Plugs in right there, always ready to go. I like it. Doesn't interfere with the door. Neat. I went through a whole lot of things. Flywheel, clutch, a few clutches. I don't know, got the shelves filled back up again, and looks like my path to the compressor is blocked. When the parts come in, I can pull that ladder out, and I moved the shelves over about 10 inches so I can actually get to it. I can get in there and replace that. It won't get in the way of my tools. I've set up a GSX shelf. I've set up a Galant shelf. I've set up a random parts shelf. Still don't know what I'm going to do with all my fluids and everything. Then I got a tool shelf. Put that up there for safekeeping. Got a disco ball. This is just a disaster. I still need to go through all of this stuff. Lightening my load a little bit. I'm throwing some stuff out. Gotta sort and figure out what I've got. Stuff I still need to dig out. Stuff I still need to clean. But I've got some random things that I've got to find a home for. 2 old bins full of GSX parts that I need to clean up. But I need air. And that's partially related to what I got going on here and here. Doesn't have anything to do with this at all. Nope, not at all. Or this. I want to clean more stuff. Need air to keep cleaning. So you can see the steering rack's already out. Just kidding, that's a completely different one. Still got to go through the front case, the turbo, but needed to make room in here first because more is coming. My Sisyphusian efforts to push all these projects forward involved days of labor and part searching. Fortunately, I had some help this time around from Dakota at Main Street Auto and Fabrication, and he helped me put together all the parts I needed to fix what's wrong with my cylinder head. He's a direct dealer for Extreme PSI, who for decades have blown my mind with the speed and efficiency of delivering my orders. He's got a beautiful 2G DSM with lots of the same parts that I have. The coveted two-tone black and gray interior, which I find to be the most driver-friendly of all. And don't even get me started on that perfect, straight airbag cover. Brother, do not take that for granted. Thanks Main Street and thanks Extreme. I got this box. I'm going back to the 2600 pressure plate again. Comfort's one thing, and then there's the fact that this car will make more torque than the 2100 will hold for very long. This is an acceptance purchase. Even though I managed to get 10 of the 16 roller rockers to roll right after a thorough cleaning and oiling, they were still a mismatched mix of up to 160,000 mile old roller rockers, and 2 viewers insisted the roller bearings in an ultrasonic cleaner get destroyed. I don't feel like my ultrasonic cleaner damaged these things any more than sitting for 15 years did, but it just made sense to buy a whole new set of roller rockers to go with all my other brand new parts. There's 2 in each box, so there's 8 boxes. I'm going to start a new Galant parts drawer. You can either join Patreon for $1 to see what's in the other one, or wait until I have to open it in a later video. Yes, I'm trolling for subscribers for $1. Look at how I spend it, seriously. I buy DSM parts and maintain my shop equipment to make these videos. In these boxes we have a whole new set of 16 lifters. There's 4 in each box, so 4 boxes. We'll put them all in the drawer with their new friends. Next, all the way from New Zealand, we have a set of Kelford TX264 camshafts. It contains a 264 duration intake cam with 11.2 millimeters of lift and a 260 duration exhaust cam with 10.5 millimeters of lift. Peak power's at 7,600 RPMs. They're tested to flow 18% better than stock when set up correctly and don't noticeably affect the idle, so they say. In order to get those camshafts dialed in so that they'll behave properly, and as advertised, is the addition of a brand new set of AEM True Time adjustable timing gears. I got a set of ARP cam bolts even though I believe that these are overkill. I picked up a new set of ARP main studs because why not? I mean 6 bolt 4G6. Factory bolts are stout, but these are stouter. And I also picked up a set of FIC 950 injectors to modernize things a bit. And here we have a set of Kigley Beehive valve springs, which some Kelford cams seem to get along with really well. They're a great company who supports our platform with great racing parts, and I like to support them back. I got shifter bushings for the Galant and the GSX. These are for the transmission side. There's also a 6AN fuel rail fitting. Oil dipstick O-rings in this bag. I've got a full new set of freeze plugs and all of my exhaust gaskets for the hot side. I've got a veritable smorgasbord of new parts. Here's a complete Prothane engine mount kit that includes all 4 engine mounts and a set of Brian Crowder H-beam rods for the 6 bolt with a 22 millimeter pin bore. The specifications for these state that they're good for 200 horsepower per hole, and that's well beyond my goals. I can put them in here with the thing that they're about to meet next, I guess. Once the back-ordered parts show up, I'll start making all this stuff fit better. It's kinda obvious what's missing. Some of the parts I ordered had to be custom made, and they'll ship directly from the manufacturer, but everything's been ordered. Wow, and there I go. I just opened the other drawer. Looks like nobody even needs to sign up for Patreon anymore. I mean, what an idiot, undermining myself. I just need to reorganize some things and fill in some blanks. My balance shaft bearings arrived here, and here we've got a set of GSC standard intake valves. And here we've got a set of GSC standard exhaust valves. Now only 3 parts are outstanding, and one of them is critical to the machining this block is going to need. I looked all over for another cylinder head, and I finally found one. Or I should say, one found me. Thank you, Abe. You are the man. Yeah, about that, the head. The more I stand here and look at it, the more I'm realizing something here is afoot. That should be there. Come to think of it, that's the only one of these that's in the right place, because these have all eyes on them, which stands for intake cam, and these all say E for exhaust. That should be there. I mean, immediately when you look at it, there's no rockers or yeah, and we got the old style 1G lifters here. There's no valves, there's no springs, and that's okay because of what I need to do here and what we just unpacked into the toolbox. Looks to me like, well, some of you out there are going to understand why that's funny. We'll just leave that there for now. 10s are damaged a little bit, and looks like something Got fur from some critter. Spent some time in the mud. All of this is okay, because this thing still is going to save me like $900 over machining required to fix what's wrong with the other head. So it'll be fun to tear all this down and, you know, get a closer look at the rest of it. There seems to be some meat on the deck, and we'll get a better look at that once the cams are out. I really don't think that he ever took a very close look at this thing, and yeah, this didn't hurt anything. It's pretty obvious that this wasn't being used like this.
Why?
This was clearly done to just keep its parts together.
No. Why?
It could be entirely possible that this was done simply to troll me, or to perhaps by somebody who knew that my discovery of it would turn into me trolling all of you watching. If that's the case, that is diabolical genius, because I've totally fallen for it. Please, let's just forget the whole thing ever happened. I thought this was mud at first, but this thing's in really rough shape here. Someone else who saw a picture of this said that it looked like boat parts. I've nearly got the cams out of this thing, and there's only a few more things to have to yoink. Once the cams are gone, everything else should be easy, right? I don't actually need any of this stuff, really. I just need a head casting, and I'm hoping that we find it's in good shape.
Lifters won't come out. Oh, we got one. Two.
Try all you want. This is going to take tools. All the rest of these things were really stuck in there good. We'll come back to that. Head oil diverter needs to go. Same for the timing tins and the busted up piece of valve cover. Let's just go ahead and get that over with. Now, lifters. Not even hose clamp pliers can get them to budge. I fought with these for a very long time. The acceleration here, it's going fast. I spent over an hour on this.
Never seen anything like this.
I'm just trying to remove lifters, for crying out loud. This shouldn't be hard.
Whew.
I'm used to these things easily falling out if you turn the head over. With the compressed air out of commission right now, I tried to imagine new ways to use explosives to remove them. It didn't matter what kind of pliers I tried to use. The bigger and more aggressive ones actually pulled the head off one of the lifters, leaving the rest of it still stuck in the head. FYI, if you can ever get one of these apart and need to remove the piston, you can just twist an M8 bolt in there and pull it right out. Finally, I just gave up on being gentle. The hammers came out and I started prying on things against the spark plug wells, where I'm least likely to do harm. I was trying to avoid it, but sure enough, that worked. I eventually got all these things out. They've been in these holes for 31 years and it took a Jafro to set them free. Now, to remove those 31-year-old valve stem seals. Unlike the Galant's original cylinder head, these valve stem seals are the original ones and they crumbled coming out as I expected they would. I'm pulling out every last thing off of this head and out of this head before it's cleaned up this time. And because I don't have compressed air to do a pre-cleaning before it goes into the ultrasonic cleaner, I guess it's time to resort to the aerosol method. There's nothing stuck to this head that's a match for this stuff. It'll all lose this battle. It quickly revealed both the good and the bad.
What's going on?
It took a little bit of time to put together what happened here, and we'll take a better look at this in a minute.
What happened over here?
On the deck surface, I discovered there's a hickey on number 4 where the piston moved in for a kiss and quickly turned into a suck. This is extremely telling to a DSM whisperer, because it looks to me like this one suffered a failed rod bearing. Being that it's on number 4, I would lean toward oil starvation, since that one's the farthest component away from the oil pump. We'll take a closer look at the valve seats in a minute, but it doesn't appear that this head actually had very many miles on it. So I'm leaning more towards maintenance than an oil pump failure. The factory oil pump with the straight cut gears in it is a stout unit. I let time pass before doing the rest of this because fumes and flammability, but the next phase to make it fit the ultrasonic cleaner is to take all the studs out. For other things that I'll be doing, I'm just going to pull all the fasteners right now. Every single stud, intake stud, all the oil gallery plugs, everything. I'm going to save all this stuff and reuse it, but they're in the way for the next several things I'm going to do. I can't begin to express how happy I am to be doing this to a second cylinder head right now. Replacing 16 seats, 16 guides, and repairing the exhaust flange before still having to recut and refit all brand new everything into a cylinder head is a whole lot of work and expense that would still leave me with a head that doesn't work as well as one with a standard size valve in it. Now, with all the last of its giblets removed, let's take a look at that horrible exhaust cap we found. Something ate it up, and while I worked here, I deduced that this thing, it didn't sit in mud. This got hit with battery acid. The aluminum is deeply eroded and gouged, not just on the cap, but also on the cylinder head's valve cover gasket sealing surface. This could be really messy if I don't fix it. However, fixing this is so much easier than the cracked exhaust flange and all those valve seats. I doubt I'll have to resort to welding. Fortunately, the flange surface on the cap is not eaten away and destroyed. Its saving grace was being bolted down tightly, and it was the only one that was. What gave away the battery acid was the smell of wire wheeling it all off the aluminum. Battery acid crust has a very distinctive smell, one that you should really try not to smell. Here's a better look at the head side of the problem. If I fill this, I'm sure that I can stop it from leaking. This ain't a deal breaker to me. I really got lucky on that one cap being bolted down. Ah yeah, oil gallery plugs. To prevent any chance of stripping the plugs, I preheated them with a torch, whacked them all good with a hammer to break up the thread sealant, and then broke them free with an Allen wrench. All of the oil gallery plugs on a DSM have thread sealant holding them in place, and if you don't take these measures, you can easily strip them out, as I have done on camera before. The ones in the head aren't so bad, but the ones in the block, you need to get them hot, and you need to beat on them. And there you go, all 9 of them. Now, the front case. It's obvious with all this cylinder head prep that I'm about to fire up the ultrasonic cleaner again. And if I'm going to do that, I want to clean the front case first. The cylinder head's going to make the cleaning solution really funky fast. And I'd rather clean out the oil pump before I do that. This video's accelerated 2,400% here, perhaps even faster once I sync this paragraph to it. Either way, I sat here on the floor for an hour and a half scraping this gasket in order to avoid using abrasives or power tools that can damage the gasket surface. The ultrasonic cleaner doesn't remove it, but all this time and effort, that's love. There's another time-consuming thing added to your life by using an ultrasonic cleaner. What do you do about the solvent waste? Nobody's asked a question yet in the comments, but you can't just pour this stuff down the drain. It contains lots of toxic stuff that doesn't belong in the water supply. Do not do that. There's oil in it at the very least. If you wash engine parts, then even the safe solutions like soapy water are contaminated. Pouring it on the ground will contaminate soil and put it in groundwater and storm runoff, so beyond filtering solids and capturing the waste, it needs to be disposed of safely. Here lies yet another problem. Where I live, only petroleum-based solvents are accepted in waste. Water-based solvents are not, and I plan to keep none of this, so I picked up this 44-quart steamer pot that's like twice the size of the amount of stuff that I have to dispose of, and this in combination with a propane burner can boil off all the water. It's time-consuming, but it's environmentally friendly. But before I'd attempt something like that, I'm going to use this as my rinse pot first. I've got all the solvent bottled up safely for now, but once I do that, this will never get used for food ever again. Actually, it never has been, so it never will. This never is going to feed anyone. So if you're considering buying an ultrasonic cleaner, just know that you need to add more equipment in order to maintain it. The ultrasonic cleaner isn't your only expense. If you buy this stuff and you do this new, it's about $150, including the propane that you'll burn doing it. This pot was about 80 of that. So let's move over on to other things that we can do without parts or compressed air. And the front case. First order of business is to get the balance shafts out of it. Both of the balance shafts utilize a grade 10 M8 bolt to secure themselves to the timing and oil pump gears. It's grade 10 for a reason. These are uncommon bolts, as most are grade 7 or 4 on a Mitsubishi, so don't get these mixed up. The front balance shaft is belt driven off of its own timing gear and belt, but the rear shaft goes through the oil pump driven gear. So after the 5 oil pump bolts are gone, and after you have the timing gear off of the pump's input shaft, you can just press on the protruding shaft to pop the whole oil pump apart, balance shaft and all. There's 2 dowel pins that go through the rear oil pump housing that make that difficult every single other way. You'd think that I'd remember that. It's been a while since the last time I've done this. I'm really impressed with the insides of the oil pump housing here. Scoring is minimal where the gears ride, and that's encouraging. Next, I need to take the seals out. This is typically easy with a flat blade screwdriver. The only thing you need to be careful about is not to jam the screwdriver so deep that you scratch the seal boss.
Man, that was in there.
No scratches. I was expecting a 3 or a 4, but that's like a 9. Be aware there's a journaled spacer that goes in the front balance shaft. There's a groove in this one. Sure is. 160,000 miles. We may modify this, film at 11. No more moving parts in this thing, except for the castle plug that I stripped using the correct Miller Tool oddball factory socket. Oh well, I guess some things were never meant to budge. I didn't try fire, it's my fault. I'm cleaning the oil off of this thing with carb cleaner prior to using the ultrasonic cleaner. I know that seems weird, but I don't like putting oil into my ultrasonic cleaner. I try to keep that to a minimum if I can. I'm going to load up the basket with all the oil pump accoutrement, and I've got 5 fresh gallons of distilled water already in here. A lot of people thought I wasn't happy with what this cleaning solution did, and I don't know why. The part I complained about with the crust and the crystallization on the cylinder head, that wasn't rinsed well enough for what it really needed, and that was the point I was trying to make. And that thing also got a full hour submerged, actually over. It was almost an hour and a half, which is 3 times longer than most soiled parts should ever need to see. I have a tendency to test worst case Ontarios so that you can see exactly what too far looks like. Truth be told, it does a spectacular job on everything metal that isn't anodized. 0 discoloration, even after the bath is well used and filthy. It restores stained metals back to their original finish, including some that are considered fairly reactive. Check your label. It does an excellent job on aluminum. You just have to rinse it thoroughly as you'd expect. Look at this. You saw what I put in here. But this isn't the front case video. I just wanted to be the first thing that went in the bath. This is more of a video about a cylinder head than it is a front case. I wasn't done cleaning parts from the last video before the solvent expired, and I started my new hobby of collecting waste fluids that I can't dispose of. Sorry to bring you 2 Galant head videos, but at least they're not the same head. I've got 5 gallons of clean distilled water in the pot. I only did a half hour this time. The rest of what's in here will clean up mechanically and all the major stuff is gone. Half an hour is plenty. Just know that my warnings in the last video came from leaving the parts in here for way too long. And this worked great. But there's more cylinder head parts. So I'm going to basket the rest of these bits and bobs and go with it, and there's still some room, so what else could we put in here? How about this fuel rail that's sitting here on the silver platter? That's perfect. Let's do that. And after a quick rinse, this is what happened to the anodized fittings. These union adapters are 2 different brands, and you can see that we have 2 different results, likely from 2 different anodizing processes. Either way, it stripped some of the dye, and you should expect this because anodizing is done with water-based dyes. Don't use detergents and ultrasonic cleaners on anodized stuff. A package arrived, and it was a lot smaller and earlier than I expected. This one only took a month to get to me. It's the regulator assembly for my air compressor, or so I thought. Unlike the listing, it's only one part of the assembly. And this is fine by me because it's the part I really needed the most. I would have settled for just the diaphragm, but this looks like it's going to work. I just need to get the base of the old regulator off of here and anything else that's in my way first. I cleaned up the threads and installed liquid thread sealant before screwing down the new regulator switch. Took the cover off, and now I just need to wire it. Fortunately, it's the same switch assembly, and all I had to do was transfer over all the wires and hardware from the motor and power cord, but off camera you didn't see me tapping threads into 3 bare holes so that I could do that. That's a $150 tap and die set that fixed what someone else's QA failed for me, you know? Anyway, now I've just got to attach the power cord, tighten everything down, and give it a once over. Plug it in and turn on the breaker. It's not supposed to whistle. It appears that I've overlooked 3 very large 1/4-inch NPT holes on the regulator that aren't on the original one. Whoops. Oh well, it works though. I'm going to put the cover back on and I'm off to get the plugs, I guess. NPT plugs you can get at your local auto parts store on a Sunday for $4.99 each. Cost me $21.26 after tax. $1.25 more than the whole regulator switch assembly cost me shipped. Never mind that it's a completely different unit than the one I ordered. This is precisely the kind of stuff that happens when you buy and attempt to maintain cheap tools. I installed and clocked the pressure gauge so that it's easier to read without sticking your head into a shelf, and I plugged up the old leaky gauge hole. Because this is not even the regulator switch used with the assembly pictured by the part that I bought and has 3 extra ports on it, it's also taller, and this created a problem where the power switch interferes with the air cleaner cover now. Sweet. Out of time and patience, I just clocked the assembly and hardline by giving her an extra little twist, and that settles it. Now it fits, or so I thought. What's going on here?
It ran once. We heard it.
It's like a puzzle to take it apart now just because it's taller.
Ooh, very bad.
Hot wire got pulled out when I put the plastic cover back on. Oops. There's a lot of metal stuff in here, and I'm glad I didn't touch anything metal, but it's an easy fix. These are all the right sounds for a two-stage compressor that functions properly to make. This crusty old hose over here that I didn't do anything with could use some attention, but no more leaks, and she just up and gets it over with instead of running all day now. Gravy. Anyway, I thought you might like to know that this is what derailed my upload frequency. I had to reorganize my life to repair a compressor and do more of the things that I need to do now to get back to the project. Like all the wire wheeling of all these ancient JDM steel brackets to strip a lifetime of funk and corrosion, and then seal them up with fresh paint to preserve what's there. And it's quite a lot, actually. Some positive things can be said about oil leaks. Oil is a fine metal preservative once the paint chips off, and don't let anybody tell you differently. I just want to ensure that these brackets don't all rust away once I fix all the oil leaks. It feels pointless to keep cleaning my garage when I just keep trashing it immediately in the next scene. But cleanliness isn't my goal. It's just the first stage of creating my next mess. I don't get so attached to cleanliness, and that keeps me happy. It's all about priorities. Filth travels from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. You know isostasy. Naturally, the filth gets all over my floor in step 2. The floor is currently ranked lower in my priorities, so I don't really care. I'm happy. You see how that works? While we're talking about isostasy and priorities, I want to shift slightly over to the principles of reduction. You see, I have this solution. Pretty simple, really. Oil doesn't evaporate. Water does. Boil off the water, pour out the oil. Problem solved. Never mind that safety clamp on the starter button. That's keeping the regulator stuck on for safety. You don't need to worry about that. I got 10 gallons of this stuff to get rid of, and because I can't dispose of water-based chemicals, like 98% of this has to go. I can easily deal with the 2% that remains, and this is how I'm going to do it. Also, while that's going on, I've got something else time-consuming planned with my fasteners. This is a regular old industrial-strength purple degreaser. I diluted it with about this much water to that much cleaner ratio. Hey, away she goes. All of these things are drawer organizer trays. And I got them because they fit the size, shape, and function for what I need to do next. And I apologize for lying earlier, saying that this bottle of blue stuff had nothing to do with my plans, because it totally does, and I hope you'll find it in yourselves to forgive me. This is Caswell Black Oxide Concentrate, and it's a room temperature, non-electrolytic, anti-corrosion treatment that rather than adding a layer of protective material to the part, it just changes the properties of the surface material in a way that preserves it. I'm adding 50 milliliters of oxide concentrate to 450 milliliters of water for a 9-to-1 ratio. The last bath is the sealer, and it says to use it full strength. This is about half the can, and the kit came with 2 of them. I can't wait to get started. We get to play chemist. This episode is full of all kinds of garage chemistry today, and I think I'm gonna add another rinse bath to the process here while we're waiting. I'm using distilled water for anything that requires water. The instructions are pretty clear about that, and also this process taught me to put a gap between the trays because you don't want any of this stuff splashing into its neighbors' yards. Now, I'm going to put a timer here because it plays a big factor in this process, and the role it plays constantly changes. It's not so bad if you know what to expect and how long each stage requires. 2 of them are constants, like this degreaser. The label says 3 to 5 minutes minimum exposure, so I'll do 3 minutes in the degreaser, about a minute-ish in the rinse, and I'm a tad late, so I'll add some agitation here in the rinse, trying to play catch-up, and next comes the oxide bath. The first time you put parts in the oxide bath, it works very quickly. It degrades with each subsequent use based off of what you put in it. I'll move you in here closer so that you can see it in real time. You can actually see it working, and it's been less than 10 seconds. The instructions say 30 seconds to 5 minutes maximum. Well, I'm not going for the 30-second result. You know me. Let's give it the full 5 minutes. I probably don't have to, but I'm rinsing the bolts before the sealer bath. It's just how I roll. It's more about cleaning the tray than the bolts. The sealer instructions are very specific. They say 5 minutes. Now, the reason I said these times change, I'm sure if you mixed that whole bottle of black oxide concentrate and threw in one bolt at a time to your swimming pool full of it, that it would blacken each bolt in 30 seconds. But if you do small batches like this with a lot of parts, the solution degrades much faster. You'll be able to observe this in the coming scenes. We put this in at 7 minutes, and here we are at 13. The bolts came out looking like an oily mess, and that's normal. The instructions say to let them dry fully. So in the meantime, let's run another batch.
Oh, gotta change the camera battery.
First, it's 3 minutes in the degreaser. Next comes a minute in the rinse. 6 minutes in the oxide this time, another minute in the rinse, and 5 minutes in the sealer. Content with the results, I began the production line activities, adjusting the timing of starting each batch so that they don't overrun one another as the oxide bath degrades and takes longer. You'll be able to easily see the degreaser in the oxide bath change color as it does its job. It will change from a clear blue to a milky white, but it'll continue working well after it's no longer blue. Let's check on our reduction process. Still chooching. Looks like the water level's always in the same spot, doesn't it? But it's doing a great job. Ask me how I know. So now let's take all that bracketry that's been cleaned on an ultrasonic cleaner, worked over with air tools and a wire wheel, and stripped of all of its loose bits and prime them for paint. I'm using a primer and a paint that's formulated for high temperature engine use, and spraying a light coat to prevent runs. This will give my top coat something to grab onto. Of course, that was all the uncomplicated bracketry that didn't require any fancy masking. Sometimes you just have to bend your parts over your knee and teach them who's the boss. But then you have to be nice and encouraging afterwards, so I'm carefully masking over all their bolt holes to put all the paint only back where it was supposed to be. I'm showing it that I respect what it is, putting some respect on it. Some of the brackets have recessed bolt holes and complicated shapes that I can't reach with a big air tool cut brush, so I just use a little tiny wire wheel on a Dremel to dig out all the hidden rust and clean up what I could reach. Turn the heat down so you get near the end of your chooch. It's great when it's mostly water. I mean, just pin it to the floor when it is, but turn it down at the end, okay? If you pause the video most everywhere where I'm doing this, you'll find that I'm trimming the tape not with the sharp razor edge, but rather I'm using the backside, the blunt end of the X-Acto blade. You only need the sharp edge about 10% of the time. Blunt instruments actually work better for trimming tape off of metal things. But this keeps me from having to change tools. I mean, occasionally I do, but just nowhere near as often. The finish I put on here will look better than factory, but I still want it to look factory. I'm not really all that concerned with having changed all the factory fasteners colors to black. That won't look stock at all. Everyone's gonna know that I've been in here. Let's be honest, I'm shooting video of what I'm putting in here anyway. Christmas Crustacean, I'm giving you a shout out because you nailed my goals and intentions right in the start in the comments. Several other people were very close to what I wanted to do, and half of everyone else that said build the daylights out of it, hey, they ended up being the ones that are right? Sort of. A lot of people should be intrigued about how we got here to this kind of a build. This is what I meant by listening to the car. I did practice restraint regarding my repairs, even though they're leaving the OEM world. I had to accept that the condition of all of the internal stock parts pointed to the exact same kind of machining being needed for everything in order to fix the wear problems that it had. So whether I kept it completely stock or built the daylights out of it, same. It was actually easier and less expensive to replace the head and fit an all-forged rotating assembly with performance parts than it is to hunt down and return everything back to factory original. It wants to be driven. It needs to be driven. So I'm going to give it what it wants. I'm going to make it a driver, and the parts that I'm using are the ones you've seen here in this video. All the rest of this stuff is getting cleaned up and shelved for assembly day, but this is the stage where it all starts coming together. Before I make my final cylinder head assessment, I'd like to play you the song of my people. Even the train played the chooch at the end. Sweet, that guy knows what's up. You can tell that's not water. That's well broken down and boiled down oil, rust, carbon, and dirt. Oil byproducts are accepted at my local waste disposal facility for free. But in order for me to comply with local ordinances, I have to reduce it down to the chemicals that they'll accept. A propane cylinder seems to cover a solid 16 hours, boils down about 8 gallons of solvent, so you figure a half gallon per hour unless you run it wide open the whole time, and about $25 worth of gas per 5 gallons of waste. You saw how helpful that ultrasonic cleaner's been for what I'm doing in my garage, and how much time and effort it saves. It doesn't do everything, and this machine adds a huge time and money expenditure to the waste process, but it's worth it. Well, we've talked about isostasy and reduction. Now there's the law of conservation of mechanical effort. Work is neither created nor destroyed by fancy tools, it just gets moved around. I never needed to boil off and reduce any of my laziness into a disposable slurry byproduct before now, but this waste process is so much easier than spreading elbow grease all over everything else, that I can deal with it. Anyway, I thought you might like to see how I dispose of my water-based solvents and detergents responsibly. I've just got one more coat here before these parts can get peeled and put on shelves. Feels good to be getting this done. Can said come back 24 hours later for another coat. Well, I took it literally, even though it was just the other unpainted side. It did give me a chance to fix the weak spots on the fully painted parts caused by using light coats. Also 24 hours later, let's take a look at how those bolts turned out. Let's see if these parts are even recognizable anymore. I kept the bolts that I bagged together in different batches so they'd be in the same groups as when I originally bagged them. This does sound perfectly logical, doesn't it? I definitely can't see enough detail on them to tell you anything about them from where I'm standing. This flat black tint just seems to suck up all the light and take your attention off of it. I mean, there's some things that you can't mistake, but this is what the $70 DIY Caswell kit did for my hardware. It's not perfect. It's clear to me that there's still potential for rust, so I'd still recommend oiling them. But I like it. Originally I bought this for the GSX, and there's still so much of it left over that I still bought it for the GSX. My GSX and the Galant will be like brothers. They'll have this in common. It's nice to be able to wrap up all the brackets for the block. It's nice to know that once I'm done putting her all back together that I don't still have this waiting for me. There's more stuff on the car that I need to paint, but with the rest of what I've got going on in here right now, I've just been too busy to pull it. I suspect that I'll have more time fairly soon to start dealing with that, I hope. Peeling all the tape off is easy if I can just remember where I put it all. It's kind of hard to see it after you've painted it. It's satisfying too. It's also nice to start and finish so many different things in just one video. The only way it could get better is if you click that like button. But isn't this supposed to be a video about a cylinder head? Well, here's two. The one on the left is the original one that got over an hour in the ultrasonic cleaner. The one on the right is the unicorn that only got a half hour in it. You'll understand why I saved this for last and called it that in just a minute. They're both really clean. You can mostly tell by the combustion chambers which is which, but beyond that, there's really not a whole lot of difference. What's different is both good and bad. Sure, there's some carbon still left on the half-hour head. Nope, there isn't any carbon at all on the hour-and-a-half head, nor in the combustion chambers. But you watched me clean those up manually in the last video, and I haven't done anything to this one yet. But look at the outer casting. It's flawless. Now, let's take a look at the hour-and-a-half head's casting and see if you can tell the difference. This is what I'm talking about. This is what would happen if you left your aluminum parts in too long using the chemical solution I'm using. Beyond that, it works spectacularly on aluminum. Let's take a look at the intake ports. Here's the hour plus head. Wow, that's going to be hard to beat. That's nice. Here's the half-hour head. Even giants fall. This one's even better. But what's best is the rest of the part's finish is perfectly fine, and what little carbon you saw in the exhaust ports and combustion chambers will clean up easily. Half hour's more than enough. It's a far cry from whence it came though. Now let me tell you why I called this a unicorn. If my understanding is correct about it, it will measure out to be a factory 5.2 inches. An uncut 31-year-old virgin head. Man, I can't believe this. How can this still exist? Let me tell you, I've been looking high and low for one of these, and everything I've found has been ported, reamed, and milled flat. So flat it's not even worth the risk of using even once, or for a minute. But even with age, you can't just crash in here with a bunch of racing parts. You gotta slow down and, resolve the friction issues first. What? I'm just using emery cloth to clean up what little corrosion managed to develop inside of an oiled journal that had cams installed. It isn't much at all, really. There's some rust embedded in the journal, but I'm carefully and gently sanding at 45-degree angles to the cut and ensuring that I cover the whole journal the same way, before switching over to do the other 45. This is by no means a perfect way to fix this, but I'm using emery cloth because I just want to mostly remove the scale. Never use sandpaper on a bearing journal. I saved the concentric passes for last, and look at that, it all came out. The cylinder head side of things looks worse for wear, but notice how the entire cam cap flange surface area is still intact. Since the cap is also intact, this means the hole through both of them still lines up. All this corrosion would just be cosmetic if a valve cover gasket didn't have to seal up against this. Like this would make a delightful oil fountain right above the exhaust manifold. I'll fix this, but I don't feel like turning this one into a 2-hour video right now. I bolted the cap down to clean and check the mating surfaces. Sure, it's ugly, but you won't see any of this once it's fixed and sealed up and the valve cover's bolted on. I'll take this over a cracked exhaust flange every day of the week. This is a whole month of my progress, and this cylinder head just changed absolutely everything in mine and this Galant's world. I told you that this video is about a cylinder head. Thanks to a lot of advice, searching, and with the help of first edition friends that are rumored to no longer be in print, a whole lot has come together in the 9 weeks since this random dude on YouTube said he was going to start fixing a Galant. And along with yanking the engine, diagnosing it, obtaining every part, working my day job, I've somehow found the time to film, edit, script, voice, and publish every detail of it so far. To be at this stage already, by myself, would be impossible without all of you. I'm not kidding. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting my channel. I got plenty more coming soon, so stay tubed.